Hello, everybody on the call. I'm going to call this meeting to order, please. And before I do a roll call, I just wanted to say, first of all, thank you so much to the city staff, the Public Works Department, the police, for all they've been doing the last 2 days to get the beach and the boardwalk up and running for us. Opened successfully this morning at 6 a.m. And I really appreciate all the work that the city's done all around town, obviously, but to get the beach and the boardwalk open for our local constituents. So thank you very much. With that, I'm going to go around my screen for a roll call. Just answer when I call your name, please. Commissioner Byrne?
Here.
Commissioner Sheffer?
Here.
Commissioner Szymanowski?
Present.
Commissioner Gay?
Here.
Commissioner Calusi?
Here.
Commissioner Schlosser? I think, are you, Commissioner Schlosser, I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
Unmuted on my end. She's muted. There we go.
Okay, just so everybody knows, her hand went up, but for some reason, you're muted, not here, Lisa. Okay,
Okay.
Max is working on it.
Yep, she's on. Now we can hear.
You can hear me?
I can.
Yeah,
Mhm.
Barely.
Yeah, barely.
maybe turn up your volume. All right, well, you're in the meeting, you can hear us. I think it's your volume on your computer, but I'm not sure. Max is working on it still. We're going to start going down the agenda, please. First of all, just wanted to let everybody know that there is correspondence, about 15 pieces of emails that have come in since our meeting on Tuesday, and most of it seems to be additional ideas along the same lines as what we've had on Tuesday. So that will be in the record. The next is to look at minutes, and I'm going to take off my mask. If you look at the minutes, Ann and her assistant have produced a total of 15 sets of minutes. I'm going to need actually 3 different consent orders to approve the minutes, and I'll go over those momentarily. 2 of the sets of minutes were done at dates previous to a number of the different commissioners being on board, and so I'll announce that. But the first motion that I need is a consent agenda to pass the following minutes. 5 regular meeting minutes starting October 18th, 2019, November 15th, 2019, December 20th, 2019, February 21st, 2020, March 20, 2020. Those are 5 regular meetings. Then 2 special meetings held on February 21st, 2020, May 4th, 2020, and then next 4 special budget workshop meetings held on the following: January 6th, 2020, January 17th, 2020, February 21st, 2020, March 9th, 2020. And let's see, there are workshop meetings held on January 6th, 2020, March 9th, 2020, and May 4th, 2020. That's a total of 13 sets of minutes. If I could get a motion and a second consent order to pass those minutes.
So moved.
Move approval.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the 13 sets of minutes that I just went over. Assuming no more discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? And I don't think there would be any abstentions. Thank you. Now the next is one special workshop meeting, which was held June 3rd, 2019. And I believe, being June 3rd, 2019, Commissioner Gay and Commissioner Chrzanowski were not a part of the commission at that point in time. So if someone can make a motion and a second to approve those minutes, please.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the special workshop meeting on June 3rd, 2019. If there's no more discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Abstains?
Abstain.
Abstain.
Okay, thank you. And then finally, the workshop meetings, the workshop meeting, June 4th, 2018. It appears that Commissioner Schlosser and myself were the only commissioners on duty at that point in time. I know we can get a motion and a second from the other commissioners, but Commissioner Schlosser and I are the only ones that can actually vote on it. So if we can get a motion and a second.
So moved.
Okay, second.
Okay, thank you. And again, it's just Commissioner Schlosser and myself, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye as well. Okay, thank you very much. And thank you, Ann, for doing all that work. I know that catches you up a lot. The next, I'm going to turn to the city manager's report. There are a couple street aid expenditures on there. I know you know that.
Thank you, Adam.
Yep.
Thank you, Mayor. The wayfinding signage program, the signage manufacturer of displays, is currently in production of the footer and foundation components. They anticipate having those components installed in the coming weeks, and the signage is in production, will be completed by June 1st. Installation should be installed well before the June 20th project deadline. The parking department pay stations all have been installed citywide, and the license plate recognition equipment has been installed, and testing will take place next week. The closed circuit TV work has been completed. We have cleaned and inspected approximately 15 miles of pipe. The water tower cleaning on 2nd Street has been completed. Regarding the Canal Dock, Grove Park Canal Dock project, the Verizon cable underneath the canal has been relocated, and the contractor will resume the construction schedule next week. Letters are being mailed out to all registered voters advising of precautionary measures city staff will be taking relative to the COVID-19 pandemic during the election in August. Social distancing and face coverings will be required for all, and we are encouraging absentee voting for anyone who does not wish to come to the convention center. Requirements and a form to receive an absentee ballot are included in this mailing. Folks should be receiving that at the beginning of next week. City Hall will be closed in observance of the Memorial Day holiday on Monday, May 25th, and the trash schedule is on its regular schedule. One municipal street aid expenditure to Delmarva Power in the amount of two actually. One in March, one in April. There's Delmarva also one Power for May. in March is $8,992.69. One in April, to Delmarva Power is $8,960.75. These are both for streetlights.
And there's one from May
I
as
don't
well.
happen to have the one from May.
Ann, do you have the total for the dollars in May?
It was,
Don't worry about it.
Okay. $8,964.98. Again, to Delmarva Power for streetlights.
Glenn, is this okay to do on one motion?
You can do it on one, yes.
All right, I'm looking for.
Mayor, just
Yes, sir.
a point of order, please. Apparently Lisa's device continues to be muted,
Oh,
and she just sent me a text and asked if that can be corrected.
The problem is that we are getting a significant amount of feedback from Lisa's side. That ambient noise you hear in the background is from her end. So I'm trying to mute it and unmute it in order to let her speak.
I have nothing on, so I'm not sure what it could be. Can you
Oh,
hear me?
now we can hear you. We can hear you fine now.
Okay, that's fine,
Oh.
Max. You need to keep muting me. I don't know what it is, but you can.
No, he's trying to rectify the situation.
It's still a lot in the background.
there's
Yeah,
nothing.
it's fading in and out in your situation.
Sorry, keep going, please. I'll just raise my hand. if I
Okay.
need. Thanks.
All right, so if I can get a motion and a second to approve the following street aid expenditures. This is somewhat unusual because we've got 3 months. For March, $8,992.69. For April, 4/16/2020 is $8,960.75. And then in May is $8,964.98. If we can get a motion and a second.
So moved.
Approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the 3 months of Delmarva Power street aid expenditures. Again, March being $8,992.69, April being $8,960.75, and May being $8,964.98. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you, that carries. Thank you, City Manager.
Thank you.
City Solicitor.
Mayor, excuse me. I couldn't get on earlier. I just had a really quick question for the city manager on the voting. So if right now residents, according to the instructions, have to have some reason to have an absentee ballot, I'm sorry if you mentioned this before, but is there some sort of provision or change in the form that would allow a resident to put in an absentee ballot because of COVID-19 concerns?
Yeah, so, Commissioner, did you hear the announcement I made about the letter that's going out to all registered voters?
I didn't. I was in and out there.
Okay, so there is a letter that is going out, should be received by all registered voters at the beginning of next week, that outlines what precautions the city staff will be taking for the August election regarding social distancing and wearing face coverings, and also included on that is a form for anyone to receive an absentee ballot on the flip side of that notice. And there are provisions if someone does not want to come to City Hall due to the pandemic.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I just was in and out. So thank you very much.
Yeah,
Sherry,
and I wanted to, go ahead, Edward.
I just, City Manager, thank you for saying that again. That's going out to registered voters. Do we have anything going out to property owners that would tell them how to register to vote if they're not yet registered to vote?
That's all on the city website. Donna is here to address any of that.
Yes, good morning. There was notices sent to the Cape Gazette, News Journal, Post Press, and also the State News from April the 28th all the way through June the 3rd regarding the voting registrations. After the nominations are approved by the mayor and commissioners and at your June meeting, there will be a notice again sent out to all the papers regarding the voting requirement.
Does that answer your question, Commissioner?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And Commissioner Schlosser, just to follow up on what you were speaking about, how people can utilize the absentee ballot. It was part of one of, first of all, the absentee ballot is a state ballot, and so it goes across the state. And the governor has already put in one of his declarations that people can avoid showing up publicly for of voting and use the absentee ballot because of their fear of the COVID-19. And all they have to do is check the box that says, I am sick or physically disabled. And that's part of the letter that's going out to the registered voters.
Great.
Okay?
I have just a question.
Go ahead.
Alan? Yeah.
Go ahead, Susan.
First of all, thank you, City Manager, for being so proactive about giving people the option to absentee vote. I think that's great and will make people feel very comfortable. So I'm glad to see that being done now. I know you gave an update on the canal dock, and we don't need to get into it here because we don't have all the information, but I thought we were going to be seeing the, what is it, the MOU letter. And a few weeks ago, you had also sent us a nice sheet comparing the monies that have been received and what's still to be received, and the cost savings as a result of the change orders. And I think it'd be good to next month or the next workshop to maybe get an update of that and just talk about all that together.
Yes, the MOU is available, and I apologize for not sending that out. I can do that later today.
Oh, no, it's fine. I mean, to talk about it in the context of the where we are in the process and in the spending is probably the best way to go anyway. So we can just do it then.
Yeah, if you can just bring it up at the next workshop.
Certainly, we'll do that as early as Tuesday if you'd like.
Well, Tuesday.
I think Tuesday we've got, frankly, I think the emphasis on that is going to be reopening. So I'm not pushing for that.
Yeah. Okay.
Do it at the next workshop. Thank you. All right, we're going to move on to, thank you, Don. We're going to move on to further our old business.
Can I?
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Glenn.
Thank you. So I wanted to take a minute to address the ClearSpace proposal because there's been several inquiries about it. So here's where we are on ClearSpace, commissioners. ClearSpace has submitted new drawings. It's 2 buildings across 3 lots.
Excuse me, point of order, I'm recused, so I'm not sure what to do, but I won't weigh in anymore from here. Just for the record, I'm recused. So thank you
for that. Yep. So they have submitted, it's 2 buildings on 3 separate lots. I'm sure you've seen that there's been demolition at that site just beyond the circle, coming into the city. There is 1 building that still remains. You might be aware that in the city, there's no demolition can occur between May 15 and September 15. So that last building will not be demolished till September 15 or sometime thereafter. There's some movement to relocate that building rather than demolish it. We're not sure exactly what's going to happen with that building at this point. Yesterday, the administrative staff met to take a first look at the plans and talk a bit about what is the appropriate process to review the plans. Based upon some comments that have been made in prior planning commission meetings and based upon the meeting yesterday, the building official decided that it will go to the planning commission for site plan review. That will be at a schedule determined by the chairperson of the planning commission. This is a project that's lingered for a while, so we're hopeful that it will move at a pace that doesn't take too long to go through that process, but it is going to go to the planning commission for site plan review. In the meantime, we've had several FOIA requests to see the plans that have been submitted. The plans for these 2 buildings, the 2 sets of plans, are about 140 pages of full-size drawings. So given the pandemic, it's been a little bit hard to address these FOIA requests. So what we have done is we've set up a link to a web page that has 6 or 8 drawings that show elevations, site plan, but we've not published that link yet because we've not had an opportunity to talk with the ClearSpace folks about that process that we're going through. So at some point, it's our expectation that that link is going to go live for members of the public to be able to see those drawings, but it hasn't, it's not available publicly yet. So we're trying to do everything we can to be transparent about the drawings while also respecting the applicant's, interest as well. That's where we are in ClearSpace. Do you have any questions process or what's occurred so far? All right. Thanks. Just wanted you to know that's something that's out there and is moving through the process.
Anything else, Glenn?
That's it. Thanks, man.
All right.
Excuse me,
Great.
Mayor, I have a question for Glenn. Glenn, can you give us an update on the gross floor area situation? I know we had started it, looking at in terms of our policy and, change in ordinance. Is that something we can at least address at the next workshop? That's okay too. I just kind of didn't want to lose sight of what's happening there.
I very much appreciate you bringing that up because I feel like it did kind of get put on the back burner when the pandemic hit, and it is ready to come back for a workshop to the extent that commissioners are ready to move back and look at it again. Yeah.
Okay, I'd just like to propose, Mayor, for the next workshop that we do that then if there's no other update at this point on that action. Thank you.
Yes, I will put that on the next workshop agenda, and I would assume then we'll discuss it again probably on the June regular meeting, and on the June regular meeting, set up hopefully a public hearing for the July regular meeting because we need the 30 days. But that'll all be discussed at the June workshop.
Great, thanks.
Any other questions for Glenn? Okay, thank you. We're going to move right into old business, which is basically further consideration and possible vote on matters discussed at the commissioners' meeting held May 12th. Before we actually get into the discussion, what I'd like to do is just go over a summary of how we came out of the meeting May 12th, and an update on the framework for reopening the city of Rehoboth Beach as we've opened the beaches and the boardwalk, and then also go into what the governor has just signed on for is opening the beaches to sunbathing, swimming, surfing, etc. So I'm going to go over the framework that we have at the moment, and then summarize that along with what the governor's doing, and then also after I go through that before the discussion, to discuss a little bit about the first modification to the proclamation of the civil emergency. I have signed that. However, it does need ratification amongst the commissioners. And so what I'm going to ask for before we go into the major discussion would be to have a discussion on this and then hopefully a vote, the commissioners ratify that. All right, I'm going to start right off on phase 0 on our framework. Again, this is a draft. I just want to go down the things that have taken place after the meeting. Some took place beforehand, but just going down phase 0. The beach and the boardwalk are now open for exercise and business access, 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. The beach is open for dog walking. The benches were removed. That's no different than we had before. The bathrooms are going to be all open as of this morning, and that's Delaware Avenue, Baltimore Avenue, as well as Rehoboth Avenue. And the bathrooms will be cleaned multiple times per day as per the state's direction. The tennis courts at Deauville are open. The running club at Grove Park is open with limitations. The farmers markets will be open with limitations. Again, I mentioned the citywide restrooms. The restrooms are open also in Grove Park. City Hall and Convention Center remains closed. Playground equipment remains closed. And all events have been canceled, citywide events canceled through July 5th, and that's the bandstand, the bandstand events as well as the 4th of July. And at the moment, the parking meters and permits have been suspended through and including May 29th. Now, I would like to consider the next phase, phase 0.5. It's not phase 1, it's phase 0.5. And as everybody knows, the governor did come out announcing reopening of the beaches to Delawareans. I believe he did that on Thursday or Wednesday. And let me just go down what he has suggested and said that has taken place. The beach and the boardwalk will be reopened May 22nd at 5 p.m. To include, above and beyond the exercising that is done now, sunbathing, swimming, and enforcement of normal beach regulations. We will still be asked to maintain 6 feet distance on the beach, as well as the boardwalk. Face coverings are required on the boardwalk. They're recommended on the beach. We are going to demarcate 6-foot intervals at retail businesses where lines are likely to form on the boardwalk. There is going to be an allowance for beach umbrella and chair rentals, and the vendors have been contacted. And the suggestion is, because there will be people sunbathing as well as sitting around on the beach, exercising, swimming, the suggestion would be to rescind the second week of dog walking, so that dogs would no longer be allowed on the beach from as of 10 p.m. May 21st. Again, that corresponds with the ordinance that is in place, and we relaxed for those 2 weeks. But I think because of the beach being wide open, that's something that we have to consider. Parking meters in this fashion, again, meters and permits have been suspended through May 29th. Obviously, that's going to be something more we're going to discuss as we move forward. And basically, the bathrooms, as I mentioned, the pavilions, and the shower towers will be cleaned multiple times per day by the staff. Now, as we move into phase 1, basically, beach and boardwalk remain open with guidelines from phase 0.5. In phase 1, when the governor comes to June 1st or thereabouts, the hope is to start to replace limited amounts of benches on the boardwalk, in the bandstand, and along Rehoboth Avenue, all taking into consideration sanitizing issues. The city hall will be open for appointments only. The parking meters, permits, in effect, again, to be determined. As of right now, they are off till May 29th, so it's something we have to think about for phase 1. The playground equipment will remain closed, although parks are open. And again, all the events have been canceled through through July 5th. Phase 2, again, further opening of the beach and the boardwalk. I would think that in phase 2, we'll replace a few more benches along the avenue, a few more benches along the boardwalk as well. Again, keeping in mind that these will be probably cleaned once or twice per day, as well as spaced out to promote social distancing. And the City Hall and Convention Center will be open with limitations. Again, that's phase 2. And then finally, phase 3, being the beach and the boardwalk open, again, limited physical distancing protocols, but at this point in time, we'll be listening to what the governor has to say, what the CDC has to say as far as those protocols. And again, another step towards reopening it at full force would be to replace additional benches on the bandstand, the boardwalk, and Rehoboth Avenue. And again, in phase 3, open up the equipment, the playground equipment. Now, as you look at these phase 3s, I look at the way the governor is focused on June 1st to be phase 1. I don't necessarily see him changing that anytime soon. And his idea is to look at things on a 2-week by 2-week basis. So I would assume if he goes through using those numbers and he starts phase 1 June 1st, that we would be in phase 3 on or about the 1st of July. But that is yet to be seen. And so then, in addition, before we open it up to full discussion, I do have this, the first modification to the proclamation of civil emergency and the order concerning the COVID-19 COVID-19 pandemic. This is something that we spoke about the other day. And all we need here is obviously if any questions arise, Glenn will address them. Glenn may have something to say, but what we'd like to be able to do is get a vote to ratify this for moving forward so that we can continue our discussion on COVID-19 here in the city. Glenn?
The only thing I'll mention, Mr. Mayor, is that at paragraph 1, and you addressed it in your remarks, paragraph 1 discusses dog walking being effective until and including May 29, 2020. You've already signed it that way, so it should be ratified as you signed it, but as you said, we'll modify that after this meeting to be May 21st at 10 p.m. Dog walking will terminate.
Before we go into the presentation of the framework, the draft framework of reopening the city of Rehoboth Beach, any questions on this modification?
Mayor,
Well, I mean, I don't know whether my questions are about I have a bunch of questions, but they're on the whole framework that you just outlined.
Okay, and yeah, so I just want to put this away so we don't forget about it.
Well, I mean, so one question on that. So we are rescinding the dog walking. That will be part of that, right?
That will be part of the discussion, obviously.
And so where is parking in that now?
Parking is in paragraph 4. It says parking meter fees and parking permit requirements shall be suspended until May 29, 2020. So under this, it's still suspended until May 29.
Okay, so my question there is, given the changes yesterday that the governor made, do we want to reconsider that? I guess the question is that since the businesses aren't open, at least those that are not able to do curbside are not open, then the only people using those parking spaces are those coming to the beach and boardwalk, and it could be an effective form of crowd control. I do think we should have spaces for the businesses that are doing curbside. I fully support leaving those spaces open. But for other spaces or for other kind of permits, you know, it's people coming to the beach are getting a free ride. Is that what we want?
As mentioned in the past, these are some of the things that I suggested as well, that, you know, parking is a good way to control the crowds in addition to the restrictions that we put on. But obviously, through the discussions and through the input of our constituents, whether they're business people or residents, an awful lot of people wanted to modify parking in such a fashion that we did the other day. So obviously it is open for a discussion. As of right now, we are suspended until May 29th. I think it would be very difficult to cut that back and then put it back. So if we were to change it from May 29th back to May 22nd, we'd have to think about it for the summer. You know, my feeling is it would be difficult to change it, take it off for the first week and then put it back on.
Yeah, I mean, it appears to me that we had consensus about suspending meters until May 29th at our last meeting. And with the input of businesses and constituents, I thought that's where we were.
I agree.
Right.
I certainly agree with that statement, Pat.
Okay. Dick, you had your hand up.
I do.
I was just saying that I agree with Commissioner Calusi's comment.
Okay, Commissioner Schlosser.
I agree with Commissioner Calusi as well. You know, we did make, you know, we had consensus, but tied into that, while we have that consensus, it seems we're going to have, as we talk about the phases, a broader discussion about, you know, removing some of the parking spaces on some of the commercial blocks. So, you know, my recommendation is what corresponds with what Commissioner Byrne and Calusi said is, look, we came to consensus. You know, the city manager has already kind of delayed things. So we don't want her to jump through back and forth on the hoops. They're busy enough with new tasks. So given those two things, I think we just stick with that and move on to the discussion because we have a lot to talk about. And also I agree with the changing the dog, believe it or not, changing the dog restriction and moving that back to what you suggested instead of 29th, Mayor.
Okay, Commissioner Szymanski, your name was up.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. So while I agree with Lisa, Pat, Dick, we did come to consensus. I agree, but I very much appreciate what Commissioner Gay is saying. We did that not knowing that the governor was going to open things wide up for the beaches. And part of the reasons why we agreed to have, these weekly meetings is this is a fluid situation, and we change things as, as we're reacting to the governor's decisions and things like that. So I'm struggling with this one. I do think that we're going to be bombarded with people coming. But we did already, it's in the newspaper and out there that we've already, said that we're delaying the parking meters. This is just a situation where it's a no-win situation.
Yeah, that's right. That's a good way.
And that's like everything. So I think I truly do appreciate where Commissioner Gay is coming from. But I think that since we already have the city staff, like Commissioner Schlosser said, jumping through hoops and making changes, that we just let this, go for now. But, I do take issue with, all right, we already came to consensus, let's just go with it, because part of the reason why we decided to have weekly meetings is so that we can adjust things as they change. So I honestly could go either way on this, but I guess I'm leaning towards just keeping them open or delaying it at this point to the 29th because it's already been made so public.
Okay, Commissioner Calusi.
I just want to comment on what you're saying, Commissioner Szymanski. I know this is a fluid situation, but unless there's a real reason for us to go back on what we've come to consensus on, I would hate to think that we come to consensus on things and then we will turn around and change it. For example, I can only see something like that happening, and I'll give the example that I'm completely fearful of, and that is once the beach is open and we have Memorial Day and a bunch of people on the beach that aren't social distancing, aren't wearing masks, problematic, we may have to say, well, maybe we're just going to have to use the beach for exercising until we come up with a solution. But maybe today we can come up with some sort of solution or some idea of limiting numbers of people on the beach if possible, to maybe not go down that path. But just my comment being, I'm generally not in favor of, once we've come to consensus on something, is just reversing what we've come to consensus on without extremely good reason.
I agree. Commissioner Byrne, your hand was up, but you're done.
Commissioner Calusi said primarily what I was going to say. However, we are in such a fluid situation that Commissioner Gay and Commissioner Ed's comments, I think are really important. And that is, things are going to continue to change quickly. We've seen that. That's the environment that we're in. And I think we are going to have to just go forward with the mental state that we may have to back off of some things and go a direction that just looks better, more appropriate, more legal, better for the health and welfare of our larger community, and so on. So, I think it's going to be situational. And while I generally agree with Commissioner Calusi that we don't want to get into, going forward, backing up, because there's enough confusion out there already. I also think that we just have to agree that there's going to be situational things over the coming weeks and maybe the coming months. So
Yeah, who knows?
thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree, Commissioner Byrne. You know, and I agree that we have set the stage for restricting or removing the parking or suspending it through May 29th. And, you know, the good thing is we will have data from this weekend. We will have data, more data from next weekend to see how it goes. And I think, you know, as we meet next Tuesday, this is going to obviously be a discussion of what we've just seen for the weekend, because it's supposed to be 80 degrees over the next 3 days. So with the governor opening the beaches next weekend, with us opening the beaches this weekend, we will see probably the crowds increase. However, again, the restaurants aren't open except for takeout, and the shops aren't open for takeout. It's limited beach and boardwalk this weekend, so I don't think there's going to be that much going on, but we will see it. Next weekend is obviously a whole different thing, and we will probably get people coming in here to go to the beach through the weekend, and I think that'll give us a better opportunity to look long and hard about May 29th, and if May 29th is the right thing to do. And I would think as we move closer to the Memorial Day weekend, we may have data that can give us a better idea about May 29th. And plus, we've got a lot of things to talk about alternatives for the parking and alternatives for walking space over the next couple of meetings, or at least through Tuesday. So, you know, my suggestion would be to keep it suspended through the 29th. My suggestion would be, unless anybody's got any complaint about it, would be to modify this first modification to May 21st, 2020 at 10 p.m. for the dog walking to end. Because again, next weekend, there will be people on the beach. The governor's thought will be that it is out there inviting the people of Delaware to come to the beaches. His anticipation is anybody from out of town will have to quarantine. I still think some things will slip through the cracks. So I think there will be crowds on the beach, nothing like a normal Memorial Day. But in order to pay attention to social distancing and the protocol required by the CDC as well as the state, I think having the dogs on the beach next weekend might be difficult, and I would think we should remove that and make it May 21, 2020 at 10 p.m.
Mayor, I move we ratify the.
I had a question, point of order. I had my hand up for a quick question before we do the ratification.
Okay.
Mayor, could you just clarify as part of the ratification, the status again of the businesses on the boardwalk, you know, or like, or the Ryans, you know, that have a, you know, golf, miniature golf, are they allowed to open? Is it still just the essential businesses that sell food? Could you just clarify that, you know, and I don't know if it's part of the ratification at this point or should be, but could you just clarify that? I had a few questions.
Yeah.
On that.
That is not part of the ratification.
Okay.
However, it is part of the state's declaration. The essential businesses, obviously food establishments.
Okay.
The non-essential businesses are a variety. The ones that he has opened up to curbside service are things like jewelry stores, some clothing stores, shoe stores. However, the arcades under his directive is at least closed until through June 1st. So the arcades would not be open under his new plan next weekend.
Okay.
And so therefore would not be open under our plan as well.
Okay. And things like miniature golf, like that's, I mean, you know, that's still closed down. That was one of the questions. I just wanted to have that clarified. Thank you.
I would say yes, because that's in the same line as non-essential, but not, you know, you can't do curbside. Not that
Gotcha.
some of these can do curbside.
Thank you, Mayor.
Commissioner Gay, your hand up?
Actually, if we're going to vote on this modification, I'll wait till after that. I do have a comment to make about the governor's order yesterday, but if we're talking about your specific modification, I will wait till after we vote on that.
Okay. Commissioner Calusi.
Yes, so what I saw in the governor's order were there were some businesses could make appointments for people to actually come inside the store, and some are relegated to curbside pickup. And it's not entirely clear. I just can tell you, talking with a variety of people that aren't necessarily in Rehoboth, but in Delaware, for example, art galleries, they're allowing people to come in. And so I'm wondering how, I can't figure out when people ask me, can we do this by appointment, or do we have to do curbside? Like a clothing store, seems to me people aren't going to walk to the window and show you everything that they have in the store, that if you have an appointment, you could walk through and perhaps figure things out or figure out what you want. So I'm a little bit confused of how that is, or how do we even explain it? I don't know if anybody else can explain it better, but.
Well, I mean, I think it is confusing what's essential, what's non-essential, and then what can be curbside and what can be appointments. Basically, the way I look at it is kind of have some common sense. Is a jewelry store, you can't basically, somebody's not going to order a bracelet and a ring and drop it outside, but they're going to have to look at things. I would think something like an art store, same kind of thing. You've got to go in the door, so make an appointment. Now, it does come into kind of squirrely areas with a clothing store. I'm going to want to come in and try it on. Those type of things, the way I see it, he has not approved those. And so it really comes down to the business owner and how they feel about opening up their doors. And I don't know that there's anything else from a police perspective that we can recommend.
Okay.
I mean, Chief Banks, anything? Sorry.
No, good morning, everyone. I would agree. As far as the clothing stores and all that, when we talked to the Attorney General's office and try to get some clarification, but if we understand it correctly or whatever, it is just for curbside. So somebody could go and order something online and they would sit it out and come pick it up. But at this point in time, that is the intention of the governor's order for that.
Yeah. All right, thank you. And I would think more of these questions are going to pop up, and it's going to pressure the governor into making quicker decisions, much like he just made on the beach situation. I'm sure he's looking at June 1st, and I know he's getting pressure from the Restaurant Association, the Hotel Association, as well as the Real Estate Association, whether it's second homes or restaurants. So there may be another declaration next week that involves more retail, gives you a little bit better definition, but that's what we have at this point in time. Commissioner Byrne?
Yes, I wanted to weigh in on the mayor's comments about modifying the date for dogs on the beach. And I do this both as a dog person, I'm a dog volunteer and chair of the Animal Issues Committee. However, I cannot speak for the other members of that committee right now on this issue. I think that we should go back on the dates as the mayor suggested, either whatever you said, the 21st or 22nd. I think having dogs on the beach over the holiday weekend is unfair to folks that are not comfortable with dogs. I think often it's unfair to the dogs because it's not a dog park, and there's going to be a lot of folks, and I think it'll just add to the confusion of the situation. And let's face it, in a normal year, we would not be having this discussion right now. Dogs would not be on the beach or on the boardwalk because of the crowds. So I'm supportive of modifying that date.
All right. So, if it's okay with you all, I'd like to get a motion and a second to, ratify the first modification to the proclamation of civil emergency, given an amendment, to paragraph 1 being, the date being May 21st, 2020 at 10 p.m. That would be Thursday night at 10 p.m., whereas Friday, it would be, dogs would not be allowed.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the first modification to the proclamation of civil emergency, concerning the COVID-19 pandemic with an amendment to paragraph 1, being that May 29th, 2020 would be removed. May 21st, 2020 at 10 p.m. would be replaced. Any further discussion? All in
Mayor,
favor? Oh, yep,
sorry. Mayor, is the, correct, the delay of the parking meters is not part of the modification, or the
It is.
civil order?
Yes, exactly. It is part of the proclamation, or the first modification is to make parking, but it's staying the right thing. We're not
Okay, so
changing it.
it's not being modified, correct, okay.
No, just the dogs.
Thank you.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, thank you very much. Now, before we go into the actual discussion, and I'll open all the doors on that, I sent out a note to the commissioners just to think about our meeting coming up on Tuesday. It's at 3 o'clock. I'd like to try to keep it to an hour and a half, no more, so the staff can go home. And I would like to keep that meeting, unless someone thinks there's a lot of other things that we can't discuss today, focused on the parking issue and ideas on how we can implement some of the ideas that we have today. Obviously, some of those ideas are going to come out today, but I would like to use Tuesday as much as possible for us to hone in on the things that we really want to accomplish. So with that, I don't have a specific list of agenda items to talk about. I think we have to focus on the things that we have control over, and those things are, as we heard the other day, basically the parking issues, the issues about the possibility of having tables outside, the possibility of using parking spaces for tables, the idea of taking away parking spaces to have walking areas. I think there are a lot of maybe unintended consequences that we need to make sure that we go over, as well as the things that we can actually accomplish, whether it's the staff or certain things like liquor licenses and whatnot. And also take into consideration that if we are going to allow restaurants to maybe have a couple tables out on the parking or on the sidewalk, what are we going to do about the retail shops that might want to put their racks out on the sidewalk? So there's a lot of things to think about, and obviously there may be other things after parking, but I think once we've taken care of the beach and the boardwalk pretty much, and with the exception of peripheral things that we've already discussed in the plan, there are few other things that we really have a lot of control over. So before I open that up, I know Commissioner Gay, you had some things to say about the summary.
Yeah, actually, well, I have some specific questions about the phases, but I'm going to get to those in a minute because I had a couple of general statements I wanted to make about the governor's order that came out yesterday. I think we got some hopeful news with the steps to reopening the beaches for Memorial Day. And I know that we will work with state officials to implement all of the measures that the governor requires for that. I also know that our city staff, city manager, police department are working very hard to put into practice all these requirements on very short notice. And I'm also sure that the Chamber of Commerce and Main Street are assisting local businesses to open in accordance with the governor's guidance. But one of the issues as we ease into recovery, it makes sense that we limit the number of people coming into the city and ensure that everyone continues to practice social distancing and wear face masks. The state's phased recovery plan still appropriately limits non-essential vacation travel. The governor's order that hotels and rentals not yet open should reduce the crowds. But nevertheless, there's some elements of the governor's plan that need further clarification, possible modification. We may see thousands of visitors from elsewhere in the state coming to town for the start of the summer for Memorial Day. None of these visitors will be required to self-quarantine for 14 days. And in addition, the reality is that despite the random traffic stops as part of this order, there will be out-of-state travelers who have not complied with the quarantine orders. That's just a reality. Can't stop them all. So my question is, why not admit homeowners and part-time residents, those who are tax-paying property owners first, rather than threaten them with criminal charges, as the state has done? This is not the city's action, it's the state's. I recognize that. Due to the closure of accommodations, the in-state visitors will just be here for the day, while our second homeowners from out of state are eager to return to their homes and to support local businesses. For example, patronizing local businesses according to the state's guidance for curbside, and possibly purchasing takeout dinners to enjoy in their homes, something a day visitor would not be able to do. Since the beginning of the pandemic, our citizens have supported measures that limit travel to their homes, and they've acted responsibly. But as we move through the phases of recovery, they should be able to ease back into their homes here without fear of retribution. And in fact, many non-resident property owners have been self-quarantining in their primary home, some for several months. Rehoboth Beach homeowners should be trusted partners on our road to recovery and not sent to the back of the line along with every other out-of-state vacationer to await the full reopening. Thanks.
Mayor, if I could just make a suggestion that we take these in order to have an efficient meeting, we take sort of topic by topic. And I think Commissioner Gay just started on a great one, one that I 100% agree with. And that is, we should allow our second homeowners to be able to come here without retribution. The question is, how do we do that when it's a state order?
Yep, I agree with you. And, you know, Susan, it's going back to what you have said. I think, you know, our staff is gonna be pretty well worked difficultly or worked by focusing on the beach and the boardwalk. I think, I don't know that any of us are positioned from a staff perspective to be able to stop people and say to second homeowners, do you have an electric bill? Because your license says you're from Maryland. The same thing, you know, the governor is trying to allow Delawareans, and that's on his reopening, it's to the beaches to Delawareans. He's trying to leave that open. And, you know, in a typical summer, we want both. And I think it's just going to be very difficult to manage to say to people, you can't come in, or to say to other people, you can't come in. Or to say to other people, yes, you can come in because you pay taxes. I know the city is not stopping people, but they will be randomly stopping people out on the highway. And hopefully, you know, some people may turn around. I doubt if most of them will, because unless they've got the bicycle on top of the car and a lot of luggage in the back, and the police can see that, it's going to be very easy for people to avoid. And so I think that's a very difficult process. The chief is here, obviously, to give his input, but I think the best we can do, the best we can hope for, is for people to follow the rules. There will be people that don't follow the rules, and we will have people out and about. But, you know, monitoring this, we've heard this for the last 6 or 8 weeks. Everybody's concerned about the people from New York or New Jersey or Pennsylvania coming into town. Well, most of them, an awful lot of them that you see every day now, have property here. And so how can we stop them? So the rules are out there. We're hoping that everybody's going to follow the rules. However, who knows?
Mayor, since we're on that as the first topic, that was a really good explanation. Is there anything that anybody thinks we can do about the second homeowners right now? I mean, I definitely heard you, but I mean, it's just really hard to keep a property owner away. They own property here, and it just seems like I just hope, if nothing else, if you believe in legally we can't do anything for the second homeowners right now in our authority, that maybe the group of commissioners sends a letter to the governor asking for some relief here or something. I mean, it just 80% of our town, right, are second homeowners. So it just seems we should be maybe sending a letter, a strong letter or something to the governor.
I agree with Commissioner Schlosser about that. I think a letter to the governor signed by the commissioners, if Mayor, you're in favor of that, which I think is important, because we have people, I mean, I can think of just, people I know who are been sheltering in place in their own homes in Maryland, for example, and they want to be here and can be or should be. If they're doing that, I don't know. I suspect the smartest thing for us to do is, propose a solution in our letter to the governor. Part of it might be, obviously they have to prove an electric bill is something that always could give proof. But, these tests that we supposedly have 80,000 a month, why could we ask? I know you can't make anyone take a test, but can we ask these people who are coming in to take the test? Because there's a good test that it's supposedly, I mean, I read the information that that they put out the other day, should be simple.
It should be, but it's not. And, this discussion has gone before the governor over the last 3 or 4 weeks from all of the coastal towns, because every one of the coastal towns is just like Rehoboth, that the majority of the property owners are from out of town, and this penalizes everybody. But this is the way the governor's put this out. I don't think there's anything that we can go to the governor and say, well, we're not going to do that in Rehoboth. We're going to allow our second homeowners. I think it really comes down to, we continue to badger the governor, if you will, or his staff about changes that involve our second homeowners. And again, we've mentioned that this is kind of the easy way out for him, that he wants the beaches to be open to Delawareans. But up in Newcastle, there's not that many people to go to Newcastle or Dover for the weekend or for the summer. We are based upon our populations being very large in the summertime. It's the same thing in Ocean City. I mean, Ocean City has 7,500 people year round, but on weekends they're the second largest city in the state, or third largest, and they run into the same problems. I think their whole thing is there's no non-essential travel in Maryland, and yeah, there's a 14-day quarantine, but the rules are on the books. How can you enforce it? And to Commissioner Calusi, being able to test somebody or stop somebody here in town, we just don't have the staff. And right now, our focus is going to be on the beach with the staff that we do have, because that's where people are going to go to. Again, when we stop people, we can ask the questions out in the state police. They will be stopping, maybe turning some away, but I think they're just doing that so that people see that people are following the rules, or they're pointing out that you should be following the rules. It's just like when somebody sees someone walking down the street in Rehoboth without a mask on, the statement will be, please try to wear your mask. On the boardwalk, it's required. On the beach, it's recommended. However, someone's going to say, you know what? I don't feel like wearing a mask. I'm a Delaware taxpayer. I'm going to come. I'm a United States taxpayer. I'm going to come. And, you know, that's one of the reasons why we're going to have these protests tomorrow, because everybody is looking at it from a constitutional perspective. And I think there are things that we can do, and our staff is doing them and plans to do more, but I think there are limitations. Commissioner Schlosser?
Yeah, I don't want to lose the thought of maybe sending a letter from us. Again, you know, I understand, Mayor, that you are supporting this and the governor's call, and I really appreciate that. But I just think it would send a strong message to the governor and in support of our all of our property owners, specifically our second homeowners, if we stood together with them and did send some sort of letter, just you know, asking the governor for some relief for the second homeowners. Maybe not there's not consensus on that, but it sounds like.
I agree with you.
I agree. I'd be happy to help write it.
Yeah, I certainly agree. I think a respectful letter laying out the facts and the request. I think it'd also be good to hear, you know, not regarding the letter per se, but the practicality of what we're asking about from the chief at some point here. But yeah, I think
he's right. He's right here. And he's about to come on the screen.
Good morning again. So what specific question did you have?
The practicality.
Practicality. It would be difficult, but it's like any other rule that the governor or your commissioners come up with that we have to try to enforce it. So again, like you said, having some type of identification that this is their second home would be mandated. Have to, you know, have a electric bill and things like that in place. And unfortunately, they'd have to carry it on them in case they're stopped by several different individuals and all. But you know, they could contact us when they come in and show us. But again, everybody working wouldn't get the same message. So they can see a lifeguard, they can see a police officer, they can see a parking enforcement and all, because we're all going to be ambassadors while we're doing this. So they can come up with several different people. So they would have to have that on them. Unless the other thing is we came up with something we handed them after we saw that from the city, a letter. But again,
Chief,
they would have to identify it.
what about just the parking? You know, everybody has their parking permits now, and the electric bill may be in the house in Rehoboth, and they're not. So what about something like a parking pass?
Probably do that, yes. I think anything's possible as long as whatever we come up with is consistent and it's out there for everyone.
Right.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, I mean, it's not off the table, no.
I
mean, it's right there in the car, so it just seems easy.
I was going to say, hey, if they're in the car, so they'd have to make sure they have it on in case somebody stops if they're walking up to the beach.
Yeah, I mean, it's not an easy situation. However, so we can move on. Commissioner Gay, I'm going to take you up on your suggestion that you put together some kind of a draft, and if you could work with Chris Johnson on that, that'd be very helpful.
Okay.
Get something to it.
Be happy to do it. Thank you very much. Thank you all for the discussion. I really appreciate it.
Commissioner Shepard, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, there's been a lot of great ideas. A lot of them are very much similar, but I just wanted to express my support for that. I think we've had a number of conversations where it's not so important what state license tag you have on your car. What matters is how you behave once you get here. And certainly the second homeowners who happen to have their primary residence outside of the state of Delaware shouldn't be treated differently than the ones from other parts of the state that have second homes.
Right.
Yes, thank you. If nobody has any further to discuss on this subject, what's the next subject you'd like to discuss?
I raised my hand. I would because I think it's going to take a lot of time, and I'd really like to have the discussion on the two things I really kind of wanted to frame and discuss: how we can help our second homeowners and property owners in general, and secondly, what we can do to help our restaurants and retail stores. So, just around the topic of the restaurants and retail stores, I would just like to throw the idea that on the table for discussion of can and should we, remove some parking spaces from the Rehoboth, Wilmington, Baltimore, part one of that, and part two, how about if we consider allowing on-premise expansion of tables outside for our restaurants? So, for example, some of the restaurants, and I think maybe Megan Key brought this up, own a great deal of property. Can they go ahead and put socially distanced tables outside, even though it may not be part of their permit right now, where they serve food and and drinks? So that's the topic I'd like to discuss. And there's a lot of other restaurants that would like to expand seating and serve meals and drinks outside on their current premise, as well as can we open up the sidewalks and parking spaces, and maybe even take the benches from in front of the bandstand and put some tables there in phase one or phase, whatever, but, and make them socially distanced. So that's the topic I'd really love to discuss next. And I've said my piece on that. Thank you.
All right. I'm going to pick you up in a second, Commissioner Cluzzi. Just one thing about serving drinks, being alcoholic drinks. Unfortunately, that's the state. The ABCC makes that decision. I'm sure the Restaurant Association is lobbying the ABCC on things like that, but that's something that we don't have any control over, but the state does. Commissioner Cluzzi.
Excuse me, I mean on a licensed patio or a licensed organization that already has an alcoholic beverage license, to be able just to use that to expand on premise or onto our. So I think that's, if they're licensed, they can still do that.
No, it's a separate license, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's a separate license and it has to go through the state.
Right.
But, again, if the restaurants that want to make some changes, they need to bring their plans or their thoughts after we discuss this to the city, just to make sure that it works from their perspective.
Okay.
Commissioner Cluzzi.
Yes, and I couldn't agree more with Lisa Schlosser about this. But since we're not quite there yet, one of the things I would love to come to some sort of consensus and agreement today is, and this is would be the first step to the potential of restaurants being able to have tables outside, is to really consider Wilmington, Baltimore, first and second, taking away those parking spaces and allow those areas for walking. I think it does a couple of different things. Not only does it make it safer for social distancing, but something that needs to come in our whole discussion vis-a-vis this idea is how it may also help with the limiting the people, because if they can't park close enough with all their chairs and stuff like that, maybe they won't have all that paraphernalia. Maybe we will be looking at, it may have some effect. Maybe it's wishful thinking on my part, but I really would love to see, I know that people have mentioned the Avenue as far as also doing that. I think to start with, I'm not sure we want to go there yet, but maybe we do. But I don't want to go back on anything. So if we maybe start with Baltimore, Wilmington, first two blocks, first and second, that would be a good place to start. I don't know how everybody else feels, but that would be my proposal to move forward with that.
Commissioner Cluzzi, if I just mentioned, I think, obviously we've heard these ideas from the group as well as constituents, and I think some of these ideas are very good. However, just something to consider as we create these walking paths, or even for tables on Baltimore and Wilmington, we would have to put up a barrier. And remember, everybody's against a barrier on the boardwalk to allow, first of all, people to walk in those areas safely, and then the street to have traffic, because we're going to have a lot of back and forth traffic as well as delivery truck traffic. So that's something to keep in mind. I guess one of the unintended consequences. The idea is very nice, open, gives people an opportunity to walk, maybe even an opportunity to put a couple tables. But we have to think about how do we separate that walking area from the street itself.
Are you proposing shutting down the streets, Pat, or just taking away the parking spaces on those?
Well, that's an interesting question. My idea initially was just taking away the parking spaces. But in terms of safety, maybe it does make sense to have a sign that only authorized vehicles can enter, and authorized vehicles could be, a delivery truck. And in the case of some of not the hotels, but the condos, and there won't be that many people there going down at this point because the hotels are closed, but they have to be able to get to, their condo. There's not that many of them on Wilmington. So we're really talking about delivery trucks.
But you're also talking about staff time. We'd have to have staff at the end of each block controlling the traffic on a daily basis. And again, if we're going to do something like this, if we're doing it for a week or so, that's different than if we're going to do it for an extended period of time, because eventually the governor will look at opening hotels, opening regular businesses, opening the rentals, and so that those people will be there at some point in time. So we've got to give some thought to the timing. Is this all summer long? Is this 2 weeks?
Well,
something like that.
Sure. But what I would like to say, though, with what I've been reading, really all over the country and where the weather's reasonable, this idea of putting tables outside for restaurants is really, is happening. I mean, that's what they're doing. And it's also, we read about it as well. It's so much safer outside than inside a restaurant, so much safer. That was how we got the farmers market going, is that we finally convinced the governor that it's much safer than a grocery store because you're outside. And that's really, to me, this is sort of a baby step to having tables outside, because you certainly can't put tables on the sidewalk if you don't have another place to walk. So I'm looking at this long term, and I understand there's issues with staffing, but we need to really consider this, because we have to help our businesses here. I think that's really part of the only way we can do it. As for the other than restaurants, to me, as far as clothing stores or whatever, it's just like sidewalk sale pretty much. People put things outside and they're used to that. Now they may want to put more outside, but there may have to be some limitations on some of these things that we'll have to come up with an idea. But I guess we're not quite there yet. For me, it's just, how can we take the parking spots out and allow people to walk? I just think it's important to do, because I think it's going to be part of our future. This isn't, in my opinion, things aren't really going to get better here until next year. I mean, as far as everything I read says, this thing's not going away. It's not going to go away July 1 or August 1 or even September. And July and August is where people make their money. So I feel we have to do what we can to help out with that situation. And if we have to hire people to do this, maybe we have to make that investment. I don't know. I feel pretty strongly about it.
Okay. Maybe this, hold on one second. Maybe this is the time to turn to Main Street, and maybe Main Street can get together with the businesses, the restaurants, as well as the clothing stores, because this is going to affect all of them, and put together some kind of a plan to present to the commissioners.
Yes.
And
Good idea.
From a street by street basis, whether it's parking, whether it's sidewalk sale, racks outside, because I mean, this is going to be a pretty broad project that's going to have to take into consideration, I think, a variety of different businesses. And yes, the restaurants are going to want tables, and yes, the clothing store may want racks out front, but there may be some other people that want the ability to have their customers walk by or park out front. So I think this is something to go to the business community and just basically let them have at it and come back 3 days later with a plan. I don't think it's going to be 3 days, but given the circumstances of what we've been talking about, I think we put this on their table and see what they'd like to come up with. Commissioner Szymanski, your hand was up.
Thank you, Mayor. Agree. I think that's a great idea for, to help come up with an actionable plan with Main Street, getting the businesses to help in that process. My question or my comment was, I've got a couple on this. I'd like to ask Glenn if or the city solicitor, sorry, if you've thought any more about the need to modify City Code 215-11, which would allow businesses to modify their floor plan in order to make any changes that would allow shifting tables around and utilizing more outdoor space if they have it, et cetera. And then additionally, on this topic of helping the businesses, if you've looked at the city code on permits and allowing businesses to move stuff, paint, doing minimal stuff right now without going through the permit process. And with those two things being said, I'm absolutely 100% supportive of shutting down some of the parking. It not only does it help the businesses utilize that outdoor space, but it's also going to make it safer for people to walk in social distance. So those are my comments and questions for the city solicitor.
So thank you for those. With regard to floor plan modifications for restaurants, we did have a discussion yesterday with the administrative staff about what that might look like going forward. And the sense within City Hall is that restaurants are going to need to be able to social distance and make modifications in a way that are compliant with the governor's orders and in a way that allows them to open up and have as many tables as possible. So rather than modifying the ordinance, because there will come a day, we hope, where the ordinance as it's currently written will continue to be sufficient and applicable. City Hall is adopting somewhat of a liberal policy internally so that restaurants that need to make those modifications, they're going to be able to do it. It's the bottom line. Sharon, the city manager, made clear yesterday that she doesn't want our code language about floor plans to inhibit a restaurant who's trying to open up and do business in a way that is economically feasible for them. So that's going to be a liberal policy. To the extent that restaurateurs have problems there, we'll maybe address it a different way, but we're hopeful that we can be somewhat lenient and allow for those modifications in a way that suits the restaurant industry. With regard to permits, there are certain things that commercial owners can do now that don't require permits. Painting, for example, internally does not require a building permit. The things that do require building permits, we're reluctant to just waive any need for a permit because oftentimes the reason we have a permitting process is so that we can make sure life safety issues are addressed during those projects. So there's a reluctance right now within City Hall to make any major modifications to the permitting process, but we also understand that this is a time for businesses to maybe take advantage of, an opportunity where there's not people in their building and they're able to make some of those things. So that's an issue, I think, Commissioner, that we need to continue to be sensitive to within City Hall and try to move permits through quickly, but we're reluctant to waive anything just because of those life safety concerns. Finally, on the outdoor issues that the commissioners have been discussing with regard to restaurants and other commercial establishments being able to use the streets. One thing we will need to keep in mind as we proceed with that initiative are the ADA requirements that require certain clear spaces for wheelchair bound and other people with mobility issues to be able to maneuver. So I think it can be done. It's just, it's one more layer, along with the issue that was discussed earlier about licensing for the consumption or sale of alcoholic beverages. So there's a few layers that we'll have to be concerned about and make sure that we address, and ADA is one that just comes to mind initially.
Well, thank you for that, and thank you for the city staff having a liberal policy on some of this stuff. I asked the question because I wasn't sure if it would need to be part of a civil declaration that we were suspending those rules or anything like that. But if you and the city manager feel good about just having a liberal interpretation during this time, I'm fine with. I just would ask that we have some sort of communication that goes out and is put on the website informing the businesses of that.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Gay.
Yeah, actually, I had some other points about that, but just in regards to the points the solicitor just made, I'm glad to know that there's leeway with the regulations, but I see that's part of the authority that the mayor and I guess the city manager has under the civil emergencies anyway, is to suspend the provisions of any regulatory ordinance. So you all have that leeway, and I think it's great that you could use it for this purpose. I think it makes sense that the permits remain in place for all the reasons you said, inspections and health and safety. But beyond that, I love all of these in concept. In fact, I love reading about other cities and what they're doing in this regard. But closer to home, Lewis considered this very thing just this week, I think, or last week, and they ended up rejecting it for a number of reasons, partly because of weather, that it would be sort of unable to determine the weather could change in a moment's notice, and then you have all this stuff outside, and that creates other issues. All the businesses, including the restaurants, weren't even in favor of it. I mean, at the end of the day, they liked the idea, but they just couldn't come through. And the parking was another issue, that it would take away not only parking spaces that make it convenient for people to come into town, but it would clearly take away, the parking revenue. So as I said, I'm a big fan of pedestrian areas in general. I think one of the things we need to just consider is that there are a lot of, the devil is in the details on this. And I'd like to, between now and next week, or as we consider this in the next few weeks, kind of look at what other cities are doing. I have the sense that a lot of them are in the discussion stages, just like we are. And I don't know how many really have done it, at least have done it on an emergency basis, because where you see that it works well, it's sort of part of their overall master urban plan. And we don't have a planner on staff, and we would be doing it in a different context for different reasons. And while I would love to take a long-term perspective and see this go in the future, and maybe this becomes a whole new part of the CDP that wasn't even anticipated 2 months ago, I think there are issues short-term. That's all.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Calusi?
Yes, a couple of things as far as if we can move forward, if we decide that we want to move forward with this idea of taking away the parking. As far as the ADA, city solicitor, we're not closing the sidewalk, and we're not forcing, people can use the sidewalk or walk in the space that was parking. So I think that shouldn't be an issue. I could be wrong about that, but it seems to me if the sidewalk still remains open, that people should be able to walk through. As far as the idea, again, of using these parking spaces, I will say, Commissioner Gay, that Lewis isn't Rehoboth. If you look at 2nd Street, that's it's a different scenario there, and I could see where that might be an issue for them. Their street, if you look at, for example, Wilmington Avenue versus 2nd Street in Lewis, it's much wider than what they have in Lewis's 2nd Street is very narrow. In fact, isn't it one way? I think it is.
Yes.
It is one. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think it's comparing apples and oranges, frankly, but that's just my opinion. And as far as, I think the plan to have Main Street be involved and the restaurants come to some sort of consensus on this. I mean, I don't think we need to do this if they don't want us to, but again, my idea of using this for walking, I still think, especially on the short term, is a good one because you can't social distance on the sidewalks. You just can't. There's just no way you can do it. You walk out in the street, at least I do. I walk out in the street anyway, and if I have to have a bunch of parked cars here, that means I'm going to walk between cars and then out into the roadway where cars are traveling. So that's just more of my opinion on this. So thank you.
All right. Before I go to Commissioner Schlosser, a couple things that just came up with other things, whether it's ADA or parking in general. Again, I think that's why it's going to be very important to have Main Street wrap their arms around this type of a plan because
I agree.
You know, Main Street can go to all the different types of businesses because, you know, some people, for example, a sidewalk sale, if they're putting racks on the sidewalk, then ADA becomes a problem. So that would have to be part of the plan from the group of Main Street. Parking would have to be part of the plan too, because, I mean, one of the things, if you recall, we closed down the bandstand for the first few weeks of the beach and boardwalk being closed, and we had many complaints from the businesses by the horseshoe of the bandstand because people couldn't drive up to their shops. So as many as restaurants as we have that would like to go out on cafe out on the sidewalk, we have the same number of businesses that want the ability for their customers to park right out in front of their shops. The ability for their customers to park right out in front of their shops is going to come with meters, and it's going to come with having the spaces open. It won't come if we don't turn the meters on, and obviously in some of these streets, if we close off the area of the parking, that won't come too. So again, I think that's why it's going to be very important to have all the different groups of businesses, maybe it's a dozen, 15 people of different categories in Rehoboth, get together and put together a plan, because I think it'll be very difficult to come up with something that's even close to good for everybody, because it's going to be difficult. Everybody's got this idea about, let's turn off the meters, but let's have my person be able to park in front of my shop. I mean, that's the reason why every Saturday night in the summer on a regular season, everybody's willing to drive around in circles up Rehoboth Avenue when there's plenty of spaces over on Hickman or over on Virginia at the meters. It's because people want to be right there. And it's not necessarily that people want to walk right there, because again, even talk about a parking garage. We've got this parking lot outside City Hall, and a lot of times there's plenty of spaces there because people don't want to walk 3 or 4 blocks. Again, these are just things that we have to consider. But I think having a business group put together a plan would be very valuable to all of us, and probably a couple residents in there too. But it's really the businesses, because a plan like this is going to really affect all of them.
And you know what? I agree with you.
Oh,
I agree with you, but it's a new day. We all have to recognize it's a new day. And I think that and part of this is education. And I think, going forward, we need to think long and hard about this. We have to change some behavior. Behavior is being changed anyway because of this virus. So I look at it as an opportunity for, I could go on and on about this, of how it could affect a variety of things.
I think you're absolutely right. This could be an opportunity for the future, and we have to look at it that way. But we have to do it in the right fashion today.
I agree. I'm not saying not to get the businesses involved. I'm completely agreeing with you. But I think we do have to really not just reject this out of hand.
I agree with Commissioner.
I'm saying be open.
I agree with
Commissioner
Caluzzi. Sorry, Mayor. I agree with Commissioner Caluzzi 1000%. With crisis comes opportunity. And I think we need to think outside the box and not do things the way we've always done them just because we've always done them that way. So this is an opportunity. But that being said, I just wanted correct a couple, or to make a couple of factual points. One, I appreciate Commissioner Gay's comments, but I did want to make sure everybody had a copy. It was for the public record as well. We got a letter on May 9th, signed by 12 in-town local independent restaurateurs that highly encouraged us to allow for outdoor seating. So I think there is, a lot of support for strong consideration of this idea at this point. So if folks haven't seen that, it's worth looking at. It's very well done. So it's a great starting point for further action, or for action at all from us. Secondly, I'm not sure everybody knows this, but I just, under Commissioner Shanowski's leadership of Rehoboth Beach Main Street, he actually expanded membership of our Rehoboth Beach Main Street. So it's an equal mix of residents and businesses at this point. I'm just not sure everybody knew that. So I just wanted to make those two factual points. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Byrne, please.
Yeah, thank you. I want to extend my support for this. I think it is an opportunity. It is time to think outside the box. I think it's critical that as a city, we figure out how to help our businesses. Right now is the time, and this affords us an opportunity to be proactive before the governor gives the approval for the retailers and the restaurants to open on a wider basis. If we could have something in place that provides some parameters to our businesses, to our restaurants on what they could plan to do. So with that said, Commissioner Edward, is it reasonable for us to expect that Main Street could kind of expedite, streamline a plan that would come back to us perhaps in a week?
Absolutely. I think I've seen the group come together and put a lot of time and work in the past weeks in helping with different things. And I would expect that we could get an update from them on Tuesday's meeting with already seeing a shape of what they're thinking. I guess I would like in helping push this along, I think I'd like a little consensus from the commissioners. In my mind, it's not all of our streets are different shapes and sizes and different businesses that I almost think it needs to be looked at by a street by street, parking space by parking space type of plan, not a one glove fits all type thing. I that's where I'm kind of looking at it from a high level. Is that what everyone is? Commissioner Calusi, is that what you had in mind, or are you thinking that's something right, more generic?
You can, yes, absolutely. Because if I look at the second block of Baltimore, that's a very different looking street than the first block of Wilmington, or even the first block of Baltimore. So yeah, it isn't going to be one size fits all, and there'll have to be parameters that either Main Street or will come up with, so businesses, can be treated as fairly as possible. And in fact, if you look at Wilmington right now, Baltimore right now in the first block, there's no commercial business from the boardwalk to, I believe, like Azafran. There's some other things there. And also Eden has some opportunity already to have outdoor dining, as does JAM. Azafran, not so much. So, it is a case-by-case basis. And what we want to be able to do is not penalize restaurants who don't necessarily have the space, but hopefully the restaurants that do will be much more open to this. Another example is on Wilmington, the Mexican restaurant, I can't think of the name of it.
Mariachi.
Thank you. Mariachi has a parking
lot.
area right next door to them. Boy, they could really utilize that. I mean, everybody's going to have something different.
Right. Okay. I feel confident and good. They'll get started, and I think we'll have an update on Tuesday. And I'd say that let's just defer this until Tuesday, and let's move on to another topic. So we can.
Yes and no. I mean, there's still the one thing is the restaurants. The other thing is still, for me, is the walking. I mean, if you look at the width of the sidewalk on Baltimore, you know, it's you can't social distance. So what are we going to do? What are we going to do with crowds of people walking down the street on Baltimore Avenue? Are we going to just say, so what? It's up to you to do your social distancing. You know, stand in a line at the end of the street. You know, these are the things that from a practical viewpoint, I'm trying to look at. How does it actually work logistically? I mean, think about it. Think about the people who are coming into town. You know, I think about how you would walk in town right in July and August. I mean, you're right on top of people.
Yeah.
Yep. I agree, Pat. Commissioner Sheffer.
Yeah, I'm very pleased that we have a lot of smart people on this call who have great ideas. I applaud the recommendations that all the businesses who are members of Main Street participate in presenting a comprehensive plan. As we are optimistic about the opportunities, we're also pointing out some of the challenges. And so I think they really, I mean, you want to talk about creativity and a passion for the uniqueness of Rehoboth Beach. It comes a lot from the folks who have businesses on Rehoboth, Baltimore, and Wilmington. And so I think that while we're having a good discussion, we may even be presented with better ideas coming from them. And so I'm 100% behind that. I think it has to be a consensus on their part, which is going to be a challenge. And I do support the kind of looking at each block separately. I think if we don't get anything done if we look at business by business. But if we look at block by block and incorporate the retail shops and the restaurants, I think we have a fighting chance of doing something that is going to be for the betterment of all.
Thank you, Commissioner Sheffer. Okay, so that we can move on to another subject.
Mayor,
go ahead.
Excuse me, just as an aside, I just got a note from someone in Dewey, and the city of Dewey Beach has just announced that their parking meters and their parking permits and everything associated with that are going into effect today, May 15th. So just for our information.
Keep that in mind, everybody. So before we go any further, so far, Commissioner Gay, you're going to draft up something working with the communications director
That'd be
on
great.
a letter to the governor, okay? And then Commissioner Szymanowski, you're going to put together a group of people in Main Street and work on a comprehensive development plan for the things that we've been talking about walking outside, having more space to social distance, maybe tables outside, maybe tables in parking lots, stuff like that. And looking at street by street basis. Okay.
Yes.
Next subject. Anybody feel free to stick your hand up.
Yeah,
on the screen. You got to do it on.
Okay.
Okay.
I want to talk about testing. I brought this up a couple of days ago, and so I want to perhaps sound a bit preachy, but I also want us to think seriously about the responsibility we have as a city. Just some introductory comments first. I think some of this goes without saying, but it lays the groundwork for where I think we need to be. So, we all know that a healthy economy in our downtown requires a healthy community. We all know that no one has the right to put others at risk of the virus. We know that we remain in a public health crisis. We know that public safety is a priority for all of us. We know that we want to do all that we can to ease the financial pain of our small local business community without compromising public health. These all go hand in hand. But we also know by listening to the broader news stories in Delaware and Sussex County nationally that we're far from being out of the woods in this pandemic situation. And so to avoid a second wave, to avoid additional spikes, to avoid the virus moving east in Sussex County into our community, while we are slowly but surely over the coming weeks going to be bringing in service industry workers to work in the kitchens, to work in hotel rooms, to be cleaning rental units, and I could go on and on where these folks are going to be working. They are not our neighbors in Rehoboth Beach. They're coming from other places in Sussex County, Kent County, perhaps south of us, communities where that have been deemed hotspots. And so these folks doing critically important work are living in families and in communities where the virus may be running rampant. So I think that a critical component of reopening, of moving in these directions, and a very responsible step for us to take is to make a very strong plea to the governor's office, to the Department of Public Health, that they bring testing in, the state, meaning they, bring testing in to our community so that it makes it easy, efficient, cost-effective for employers of the restaurants and businesses, hotels, et cetera, to be able to test their employees, the ones that are going to be having contact with food, with touch on a lot of retail things, in cleaning situations, in hotel rooms. This is going on all over the country. We're being told by CDC, by public health officials everywhere, the testing and then the contact tracing that is a component of that really needs to happen. We know that the governor of our state is in the process of beefing up of the testing program in Sussex County. The CDC was brought in when it was deemed a hotspot. The governor has announced that he's moving toward being able to do 800 tests a month, which is much more than double where we've been. The governor has announced that he's hiring 200 individuals to do contact tracing. We deserve and we need some of that action from the state government here in Rehoboth Beach, more than our other coastal communities because of the large number of people that are coming in, the large number of employees that will be coming in from possibly hotspot type communities. I know that our mayor, I know that our city manager has developed good working relationship with the governor's office, with the director of the Department of Public Health. And so I request that they make very strong request. And if we need to go on record, a motion or something, then I make a motion to do that. I think we can't move in these directions without taking this responsible step.
Dick, I appreciate those things. I'm with you 100%. However, as you look at what the governor's had to do over the last 2 or 3 weeks, he's shifted his testing to the western side of the county from Newcastle. If you look at the numbers on a municipality area or zip code around the state. And if you look specifically in Sussex County, the zip code of Rehoboth Beach has the lowest number of positive cases per 10,000, whereas Georgetown, Millsboro, the western side of the county has anywhere from like 175 to 500 per 10,000. And, you know, we've talked to him. I know on the mayor's calls, the statewide mayor's calls, a number of different people have said the same thing. You know, when can we get more testing? Well, his tests, and he's got a limited amount, as you can imagine, in Delaware, are focused over on the western side of the county because that is the hot spot. You know, it's Sussex County is a hot spot, but he's basically pushing towards the hot spot being along the 113 corridor.
Yeah. And so
I just don't know
all due
if
respect to your comments. We need to be proactive on behalf of our community. This is preventative. If I mean, it's hindsight for those communities in Western Sussex, for the chicken plants, et cetera, but had they been able to anticipate and done all of this a month, 6 or 8 weeks ago, they'd be in a very different place right now. So I think we need to be proactive. We need to be preventative. We need to at least advocate as best we can for what possibly the state could do on our behalf.
And we can contact the Department of Health and ask those questions. We will do that.
And isn't part of your message that the people from those areas that the mayor just mentioned as hotspots are coming to work here?
Absolutely, Susan. When we look at service industry workers in the kitchens, in the hotel rooms, et cetera, where do those folks and those families live?
Yeah.
And it's often in the hotspots, close to those hotspots. I think we need to be concerned about that.
Well,
but the metrics on this, you know, they're talking about 80,000 tests a month. I don't know how many people have been tested so far, but in the state of Delaware, we have about 1 million people. I mean, that's our population. So, you know, there's a good possibility that prioritizing this would make sense if we can come up with a reasonable explanation logistically and looking at the metrics. I think you could have a good argument for that.
We should include it in the letter.
That's good. I was just thinking that, Steve, actually. It's a good point. I would agree to that, Commissioner Byrne, to your question about do we need some consensus on something. I don't think that's a bad idea, to be honest. I mean, today, Mayor, we might be one of the lowest percentages, but we're going to bump up to, I don't know, what do we get usually on Memorial Day? 30,000 people, whatever it is in town, thousands and thousands of people. It's going to change. I mean, so.
I think we all agree that it's a great idea and there's a need. And since we're handing out tasks for people, I volunteer, Commissioner, to take the lead and work with the city staff and Susan to include it in the letter. I don't think any of us disagree with it being a good idea.
Well, I think there's 2 letters here. One is talking about second homes, essential travel. That's a different department. Department of Health is a separate thing, and I think it needs to go to the Department of Health as well as the governor. So with that being the case, Commissioner Byrne, would you want to take on maybe drafting up a letter and working with the city staff, maybe another commissioner to draft that up, to get that off to the Department of Health?
Sure. I'm happy to draft something. I'm happy to pass it by anyone. I think, though, for it to have some clout and some influence, our mayor and city manager have been working with the governor's office and with, what is her name, Dr. Carl
Rattay.
or Rattay.
Rattay.
You know, where is the clout there and the influence? But I'm happy to draft something. Sure.
I can help you, Dick, if you want, or you can send it to all of us, whatever you're comfortable with.
Do you think it helps to copy our senator? And
Yes.
Oh, On both letters.
Yes.
Yes, we copy all of our representatives locally. But I think they need to be two separate letters.
Yeah.
Because the subjects are pretty broad, in itself.
Different decision makers.
All right, thank you, Commissioner Byrne. Next
Thank you.
topic.
I had I just a suggestion, and maybe this is just teeing it up today and talking about it Tuesday. But the governor's guidance requires that the municipalities, I guess it is, come up with a way to limit capacity on the beaches. As we open them up on open them up before Memorial Day, and to limit access points, and then to station, and then so those are mandatory requirements, and then a recommended requirement is to station beach ambassadors at the access points. So I'd love to just hear kind of from the mayor and city manager, what do we need to do as a board of commissioners to help with that? Do you have ideas to tee up, or is that just something that we make a big part of the agenda on Tuesday? Totally open to suggestion, but I just think it's something we need to talk about, because we're gonna have to do something according to the governor's order.
I'll say something first, then turn it to the city manager.
Sure.
Obviously, as we come towards Memorial Day weekend, we're going to have the lifeguards. We're going to ask the parking department to get involved as beach ambassadors or people walking around town, suggesting social distancing, suggesting masks, as well as the summer officers, as well as our regular officers. So we will have people patrolling the beach, the boardwalk, the area, as much as staff will allow, given the circumstances. With that, I'll turn it to the city manager.
There's not much else to say. I think the mayor covered it all. That's what we have. We have plans to place all those who, from the parking department that would otherwise need to be working because the meters are off, to employ them as ambassadors, attendants on the street to assist with that.
What about limiting capacity on the beach? I mean, I've seen a lot of good ideas, heard ideas. I think even the folks the organizations that provide, or the businesses that provide the umbrellas and chairs and such they're willing to somehow, if it's possible, maybe help set up socially distanced pods, if you will. I think it was a recommendation from somebody in the last meeting, but I'm just curious how we're going to, manage that capacity issue, and what, if we need to do something as a board or work with the businesses, or I'd just love to know what we can do to help. It's going to be a tough one.
I'll answer from my perspective and then the city manager. Obviously, as I've said a number of different times, my feeling is the crowds are not going to be as overwhelming as they are typically on a Memorial Day. Yes, there will be people in town, but the restaurants aren't open, the shops aren't open, the stay-at-home order is still in place, the essential travel is still in place in quarantine, so it's going to be limited. However, these people that we've just mentioned will be moving around and trying to keep people moving. Now, limiting capacity on the beach, sure, if we had the staff, we could have somebody stand at each entrance as well as the staff walking on the beach. Again, we don't have that, and especially times now, we're going to have limited amounts of revenue. I think it's just working with the staff to keep people moving. I have had a number of emails against the idea of having beach tags because people think it's too soon. It's something, and I've said this before, that probably takes 3 to 6 months just to put together a good plan and put things into place to make it happen. But I have had a number of people say that beach tags aren't the thing to do at the moment, and some of them have been the beach people that handle the vendors on the beach. And I'll turn it to the city manager. Any thoughts?
I really don't have anything additional to add. I don't think at this point the commissioners have anything to do. We're dealing with it operationally. The police chief is working with the beach patrol captain, and as I mentioned to you before, Chief Banks is in charge of that beach patrol operation as far as manpower and how best to utilize the beach patrol this year. Captain Buxton is certainly still present and overseas, but he'll be reporting to Chief Banks.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Any other, I see Commissioner Cluzzi.
Yes, just a comment about beach tags after doing some research and talking to folks who live in Jersey and so forth. Beach tags don't really help with capacity. In fact, what they seem to use it for in New Jersey is a revenue generator. And that's really not what we're looking for. Again, and I've said this every year since I've been on the commission, I still believe that we should increase the daily parking permit fee pass. I think that would help in terms of capacity, because we'll end up turning some people away. But you know what? We are overcrowded. I hear over and over again from people saying the beach isn't the way it used to be. I used to know people on the beach. We get these people from out of town, and I mean, there's a lot of people from out of town, but we're getting people who want to start fights on the beach over things. It's not a good situation, but the beach tags is not used currently, or it doesn't seem to be used for limiting capacity in New Jersey. It's a revenue generator, much like our parking. And so that's one comment I wanted to make. The other comment, and this, this is probably something that's out there. You may think it's kind of crazy, but so why don't we have people like Katz and Lynham set up all the umbrellas and chairs? It's like in Europe, you know what they do in Europe? It's all set up, and you go there and you have to pay for sitting there. That would limit capacity. It'd be an automatic. People, I know this will be like, people will think this is some people will think this is totally crazy, but it would do the trick.
I mean, but that's a high, I mean, people would be paying more money than just a beach tag or permit. And then you've got constitutional issues saying people can't bring their own beach chair.
They couldn't bring it, but what they would do is, if they put the umbrellas in places, forget about the chairs then. Just put the umbrellas so it creates an area that would be socially distant.
Yeah.
I'd honestly, I mean, it's a good idea, and I think we have to look at all, we have to be innovative and think and toss around everything. I think I'd rather see, rather than force them pay Katz or Lions or Lynham, that we have 10-foot sections staked off, and it's first come first serve or something like that.
The problem with that, though, is, remember, as far as tides and so forth, you're going to have, who's going to put all of those stakes down and rope off, or however you're going to do it, and then pull them up every day? I think that's just, from a standpoint, it'd be tough to do. I mean, maybe you get Katz and Lynham to do that. I don't know. I think it would be a lot easier to just stick the umbrella up, and then they're used to taking them down. So anyway, just my thought, crazy as it is.
And we can probably speak to Katz and Lynham and see what their thoughts are. They're hurting as well as any other business now, because they're losing a chunk of money on a daily basis. They would have had some of their umbrellas up already in an 80-degree weekend, even with the parking meters down. They would have had a lot of people already this weekend and going into the future. I mean, now that the governor's going to open that up, I still think that there's going to be issues with people saying with their Katz and Lynham's chairs and umbrellas, I don't know if I feel from a health perspective good using theirs. I'm gonna bring my own. So, I think there are challenges just about everywhere we go, given this pandemic. And I think we do have to think outside the box, but, I don't know that, we could push Katz-and-Lynam to have to do something like that. It puts a lot of labor in.
Well,
Mayor, I just wanted to add that I have been in touch with Katz-and-Lynam, both Mrs. Lynam and Rusty Katz. They are coming up with their own individual deployments, if you will, for their umbrellas, with social distancing in mind and specifically with cleanliness and disinfection. So we have been in touch with them. They are aware of the needs of that, and they're working with staff to come up with a plan there.
Thank you.
And Mayor, Commissioner Schlosser and I both spoke with Mrs. Lynam and had a good conversation about her perspective on crowd control on the beach and beach tags and whatnot. And you know, like the city manager said, they are working to think about things, but there are challenges that they have. You know, with the expensive canvas and everything, you can't just put bleach on it, and
Yep.
so they've got some challenges. And like everyone else, it's staffing. Staffing challenges are going to be a big one. But they are working and thinking. I just don't think from the city we can force people to pay a private for-profit company to have to use their umbrellas that have been preset. But yeah, that's just my perspective.
Okay, Commissioner Stephen Schiffer.
Yeah, one of the other things, I mean, I think I applaud people for trying to get outside their comfort zone on recommendations. We may want to consider, it may not be an immediate consideration, but we get a fair number of buses that bring day trippers in, both within the state and outside the state. And we may want to reconsider coming up with some type of a fee per seat or per bus or whatever that might be, is another way to not necessarily, we had originally looked at this as generating revenue or offsetting costs, but it may just be a way to offer a reasonable deterrent for the crowds that come in as day trippers.
All right, thank you, Commissioner Schiffer. I would like to put a hold on our discussion right now. We do have 2 call-in people. We've been having our meetings been going 2 hours already. What I'd like to be able to do is, so we don't hold these 2 people on, allow them to speak and make their comments, and then we'll go back into the discussion. And the first would be Rick Perry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Actually, I just, at this point, want to applaud you for the efforts you're all making here today. I think the discussion has been very, very thoughtful, and I think you're hitting on all the right topics. I encourage you to continue to work collaboratively and to think outside the box as you're dealing with these very difficult and thorny issues. The most important thing being the safety and health of our citizens. And also with a reminder, that our small businesses are critical to the ongoing life and vitality of the residents of this city. And, that is a clear and stark indication of the fact that we are in this together. Thank you for giving me the opportunity.
Thank you, Rick. The next is John Swift.
Hi, can everyone hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Hey, Mayor and Commissioners, just want to thank you for addressing all these complex issues, to opening the beach and the boardwalk and having these weekly meetings. I did want to ask one question to pose to all of you. Using social distance and social distance guidelines and by appointments only, is there a plan to open City Hall to citizens?
Mr. Swift, good morning, good afternoon now. This is Sharon Lynn. In phase one of the draft phasing in plan, the draft framework for reopening, phase one is when we will open City Hall just for appointments only. We have to keep in mind that this is a very busy time, and we have many folks coming in off the street asking questions. So business as usual will not happen in City Hall for at least until we get into phase three. So to answer your question, yes, by appointment only, sometime I would presume in June for appointments only.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Swift. And that's it for the people that called in. I'm going to come back to the commissioners but with a couple comments. And this is for Commissioner Szymanowski. I would suggest also, and I think most of the businesses are already doing this, but looking at June 1st is what's anticipated by, I think, a lot of people, is when the governor is going to kind of open the spigots a bit, whether it's for retail stores or restaurants or second homes, rentals or hotels. And what would probably be very good to have when you're working with these businesses on a comprehensive plan is to see where the businesses are today relative to June 1st, because I've got to think, for example, restaurants, I know some of the people that own the restaurants are looking at June 1st and hoping for maybe 50% capacity. And so they're basically marking their floors, moving their chairs to get to that point. Same thing with some of the retail. And the same thing with the hotels, kind of see where the businesses are, because once he flips the switch, I'm sure they want to open up the doors quickly. And so I'm sure they're planning for something around June 1st, but it would probably be helpful to know where they are, because as they get the doors open, it's going to affect what the plan is for what we do on the streets as well.
Yep.
Just a suggestion.
Thank you.
Next subject, if anybody has something.
Yeah, I do.
Okay, Commissioner Gay.
First of all, it's a great segue from what you just said about the dates, because, I've been getting a lot of requests from people wanting to know, when various things are going to happen, when rentals are going to come back, when businesses are going to open. And we, what I tell them is that the June 1st is the target date. And when you went through the phases earlier, you talked about, what might happen in phases 1 and 2. But I did just hear you say that, there may be further openings from the governor in phase 1. And I'm having the sense, I know that Ocean City just reopened their hotels and rentals today. And so it seems like things are moving on a faster track than the initial phasing might suggest. And people out there want to know, and so then maybe that's something else that can be in our letter to the governor, but they really want to know, and especially with regard to rentals, all the more reason why the owners of those rentals, if they're not living in the state, should have access before the rentals go back. Otherwise, they're losing money by using time that they could be renting to get their house together. So that's kind of part of the mix. But more than anything else, people just want advance notice. That's what I'm hearing.
Well, I appreciate that. And you saw how much advance notice we had about the beach.
Right.
And to go back to your comment about Ocean City, I did see that. And much like Ocean City, a week and a half ago, Ocean City, the mayor said he was going to open the beaches May 22nd. Mm-hmm. And he was going to work with the governor on his stay at home or whatever. The governor was caught off balance with when the Ocean City opened May 9th. They've straightened it out behind the scenes. I think there's been a little bit of noise. Well, the same things happened today. Apparently, Ocean City's mayor went against the governor's orders and I don't know how the governor's going to explain it at the end of the day, but apparently behind the scenes, he was completely upset. So, you know, as the way the governor's looking at this, again, he's got his metrics, and he's got the opportunity, just like any governor does, that to look at each state, the way they're doing things. I mean, some states that don't have many cases still have the 14-day quarantine in place. You know, some of these states, I've heard a state in the Northeast that has said that you can't travel there without a 14-day quarantine into phase 3. And this is a state that has very few deaths and very few positive cases relative. I think the state actually has less than Delaware. And all around the country, different states are making different decisions, as you've seen. I mean, some are almost wide open. And, you know, we're going to have data again. And I think that's how the governor's looking at it, is data on one side. And then on the other side, as I've said before, you have these lobbying groups coming after the governor and saying, whether it's the real estate agents or the restaurants or the hotels, saying open, open, open. And that's why I think he's talking and talking. And I'm glad he has said that he's focused on June 1st as a phased in opening, but he's never said, this is how I'm going to do it on June 1st. Some he may extend, some he may do something earlier. So I mean, I think the best to do is we can just explain to our people, that's where it is, be ready. He just surprised us with the beach. That was something that we weren't expecting until, you know, June 1st, actually. And so, it's coming. And we're asking him every week, a couple times, what now, what now? And we are trying as best possible to get that information out to you all.
I just wanted to mention that was something. But there are a couple of, on your framework, the various phases and park phases that we're in, I had a couple of detailed questions. One is on the bathrooms being opened, and I know they're being cleaned multiple times a day. Are we also providing sanitizer in there for patrons?
Yes, we are. So I've been in contact with BB&T, the folks, the cleaning contract that we've been using for several years. Also, yesterday, several staff and the mayor and I were on a call with the governor's office for their public safety and health, Mr. Jamie Mack. We had a call-in meeting with him and just talking about the city's responsibilities and any liability issues that we might be exposed to. And the guidelines that Mr. Mack was able to provide, actually, we have been doing consistently more of. So we have been doing increased frequency of cleaning. They're recommending cleaning twice a day. We do that actually more than that. We talked about the benches, the foot showers, the drinking fountains that are off at this time, and all the surfaces that need to be addressed in our cleaning. So the cleaning folks and our own city staff will be in tune with that, and we'll be providing that throughout the season.
Right. Okay, great. Thank you. Another question is, the benches are gone, but the pavilions, I think somebody had asked that question the other day at our meeting. What are we doing about the seating in the pavilions? Are those going to be closed off?
The pavilions are not being closed off. The pavilions are open, and we're going to deal with the social distancing issues there.
And then, so then they would have to also be cleaned multiple times a day, right?
Well, most of those structures are wooden, so we have plans to either spray them or treat them with some kind of disinfectant.
Okay, great. Just two more questions. One is, have we, in terms of both crowd control as well as just the work that whoever's working the boardwalk and the beach have, is there any thought about limiting entrances to the beach? I don't remember how many we have, but I know we have a lot. To closing off some of them?
30 plus.
We're not limiting,
You're not.
we're not
Okay.
limiting any entrance to the beach. We don't have the staff to,
Okay.
to just put on there.
Okay.
Again, as I said, the police chief is working with the captain of the beach patrol, and we'll utilize as many seasonal staff that we can.
Okay, all right. And then the last thing, and this goes on Commissioner Sheffer's comment about the buses. I had wondered, I mean, first of all, I think buses may be limited through the first couple of phases just by the number that can gather. In phase one, I think it's still gatherings of 10. And I'm not sure if it goes to gatherings of 50 at phase two or not. But even if it does, maybe some buses that come into town have 50 people or more. I don't know. And so I guess I have wondered if maybe buses just shouldn't be allowed in this summer as part of a crowd control, or certainly not until phase three. Let's put it that way. Like that.
Well, that's something I'll check with the city manager and the parking department people as well. I would imagine, just like some of the airlines businesses are concerned and other travel trains, that a lot of these bus companies are limiting what they can do.
Right.
That's something that we can check into and see, because most of those buses seat anywhere from 30 to 60 people, and
yeah,
obviously that's probably not something to allow in some fashion or another as much as we can until phase three.
Right. Okay.
Commissioner Schlosser.
You're muted.
Muted.
Okay. Gotcha.
Okay.
I can
Okay,
hear you now.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Just as I brought up in the last meeting, and so Mayor, I appreciate you addressing this, and Commissioner Gay again today. Just whatever, and I know you're doing it. I'm just underscoring it again since I brought up last meeting, and that is whatever we can do to get the dates for short-term rentals and when they'll be allowed. And I know you're working it. Just want to underscore from my perspective, that's really important. So thank you, Mayor, for all you're doing with the governor's office, and for Commissioner Gay for bringing that up again. Secondly, I just wanted to bring up a letter that we received from one of our constituents who brings up a concern. I thought this was kind of interesting because he brought it up for Lake Avenue, which is between King Charles and
Lake Drive.
Excuse me, Lake Drive. Thank you. Thanks, Steve, for correcting me on that. Because it's the one between King Charles and Bayard. That there's becoming a bit of an issue there from a safety as well as from a health perspective, where runners and walkers and bicyclists and dog walkers are using that street quite often, and it's very narrow, so it's causing some issues. So I don't know what anybody else's perspective is. I just thought it was interesting, some of those narrow streets. Is there any thoughts or any perspective on whether maybe we should be limiting it to authorized traffic right now, or something along that track? I just wanted to bring that up to the commissioners that we received that. Is there any thoughts or feedback, or should we be doing anything regarding that letter and the ask in that letter? So I'll open the floor up, but I did want to.
Obviously, we all received it. I did as well. As a matter of fact, I just looked at my phone, and I apologize for saying that. I just looked at my phone. I just got a text from one of the gentleman's neighbors saying, as a neighbor, I'm very much against it, and he's got 2 or 3 other people on the street very much against it. Lake Drive, whether it's eastbound or westbound by Silver Lake, those are one-way streets, and there's parking only on one side as it is, and that is, a way in and out of town. And unfortunately, a lot of people, we don't have a policeman standing there. We should probably put up a big sign, but it's a one-way street going west, what he suggested, and everybody comes across the bridge and turns right there with their bicycles. And one of the things that we have to do as we look towards bicycle routes through the city is give a better way to have people follow the rules. But those right now are one-way streets, and unfortunately, you get people walking on it, which is fine. There's a sidewalk and it's wide, but you get traffic that uses that rather than other streets to go from King Charles to Bayard. But you get the bicycles coming the other direction, and they typically ride right in the middle of the street.
Yeah.
But that's just to give you that perspective. There are a few people on the street that would prefer not to have something like that because
Okay.
their fear is all of a sudden more people out in front of their house.
Well, I think he was
and-
trying to eliminate the number of people in front of the house, right? I
No.
think that's what the
No,
original
he-
letter asked.
Yeah, that was his thought, but if you close it down to traffic, except for the people that live there, there's gonna be more people out in front of his house. That's the
Oh.
point. I think he was
Okay.
looking more
I understand.
for safety because bicycles going one way, walkers going one way, and cars the other way. But if people pay attention to traffic, it shouldn't be an issue. All right?
I have to say
Um,
that, Mayor, obviously, I also received the letter, and I deferred to our police chief and director of public works to take a look at the situation, that they certainly would bring their expertise and understanding of these issues. And so that may be another way to because we also don't want to pit neighbor against
Well, yeah.
neighbor, and I know that the chief would certainly have a good perspective on this.
Okay, I will ask the chief to look into it. Commissioner Szymanski.
I'm going to defer any comments at this point.
Oh,
Thank
okay. You had your hand up.
Yep.
Okay.
I raised it.
While we have a little break here, Margaret has gotten a couple of emails that she'd like to read, if we could. And there's just two. Please.
Thank you, Mayor. The first one is from Stan Mills. He says, "Goodbye, Mayor and Commissioners. As Chair of the Beach and Boardwalk Committee, I offer our committee services if you would like analysis of any topic from the perspective of the 9 members of the Boardwalk and Beach Committee. I am mindful that for anything related to the current pandemic, the Mayor and Commissioners might want to address directly and on a more timely basis than the committee could provide given FOIA noticing timelines. But again, we are willing to perform any research, analysis, and to make recommendations on any task assigned to us. Thank you, Stan Mills, Chair, Boardwalk and Beach Committee."
Good.
And the only other one I received today was from Sherry Boren. "Good morning. I live at 308 Munson Street, and I am thrilled that I will be able to walk on the boardwalk, masked and 6 feet apart, of course. I have multiple sclerosis, and I need to stop to rest my legs, which gets fatigued. Otherwise, I may fall. Please consider putting benches back for those of us who can walk but need to rest our legs as well. Thank you for your consideration, Sherry Boren."
Great. Thank you very much, Margaret. It sounds like we're coming up to the downhill side of this. Again, if we look at Tuesday, we've got to give a lot of thought, some to what we're talking about, and Edward's going in to work with the businesses, is to do with parking, obviously, because if we take some of the spaces away, it has something to do with parking. But also keep in mind just the thought about revenue for parking. And as we're looking forward, there may be things we want to do. If we close off, for example, Baltimore and Wilmington, we may want to keep the meters on Rehoboth and then the other streets because that way it pushes people out. But again, as I mentioned before, a lot of the businesses don't want to push the people out. They want people in. So that's something to think about for Tuesday in the parking side. And then,
Mayor, may I
Sure.
just chime in there? So today is your voting meeting. I don't know if the commissioners are prepared to do that, but we're dealing with the parking attendants and the staff that we have coming in. I know the meters are off until the 29th, but is there any way that the commissioners can consider coming to some kind of consensus as to when, after the 29th, we would be turning them back on?
Maybe we give
I'm not
everybody-
ready
yeah.
to do that today, but Tuesday, happy to see how things went over the weekend and such. That's just me. I'd say wait till at least Tuesday. I'm not prepared to do that, but that's.
Yeah, I've got to think about it a lot. I mean, yeah, I'm not quite ready today to make a commitment one way or another.
City manager, thank you for pointing it up. And I think we all have to recognize how hard it is for you to do your job, on the flip of a switch and needing some lead time. I would say that I'm not ready to make a decision, but I am leaning towards the 29th. I'm leaning towards them going back into effect. Like Commissioner Gay and I said earlier, the fact that the beach opened more quickly than we were anticipating is a bit of a game changer in my mind. We certainly were not anticipating it opening up for sunbathing and swimming this early, and that certainly that changes things. So I'm definitely leaning on earlier rather than later at this point.
Yeah.
Well, and I appreciate that. I guess my point is more that if you will be considering Tuesday to lighten that up from the 29th to the 22nd, that will make it very difficult for us to bring in the folks that we have.
No, I think the consensus is we're leaving at the 29th, but
right.
What the question is after the 29th.
Right.
Right.
And a procedural question is, I know that these meetings have been set up as special meetings. They haven't been set up as special workshops. So I'm wondering if maybe the agenda, which I know is a general one that says what we're going to be talking about each week, could also say discussion and possible vote, so that if there was something to vote on, we don't have to wait till the regular monthly meeting.
I think it does say that.
Does it say vote?
I think on the Tuesday meeting it does.
It does. It says vote. Okay.
I would ask that each of the weekly meetings do have the potential to vote.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And that was the reasoning behind it, is putting in that language, because there may have been things that we had to decide on a quick basis. Right. We're generally talking about COVID, but there may be things that we have to address quickly.
So what I'm hearing is that, sorry, Mayor, we're going to most likely keep the meters off until May 29.
We're definitely keeping them off till the 29th.
Definitely keep it.
Yeah, we're definitely.
That's the impression I got with the declaration. All right, and obviously, because this is something that's very concerning as we move forward, if you all can take the time and effort, and I know you will, to think about it over the weekend. Don't go out in that 80-degree weather. Don't go to the beach. Just sit in your house and think about what to do with the parking meters. Just kidding. But if you can have some hardcore thoughts on that, because the sooner we can give the city manager and the staff a little bit of timing, the better. And if next Tuesday, I think, is the 19th, that would be pretty helpful, as we're looking at, that gives us good 10 days to focus. And then we can get public relations out and whatnot. And I think by doing the 29th versus the 22nd, we've gotten a lot of positive feedback from people. But as Commissioner Sosnowski said, there has been a game changer. The boardwalk's open, the beach is open, that we didn't really anticipate until the 1st. And so all of a sudden things are backing up. But if you can give that some thought, that would be very helpful.
Certainly.
Now, we could adjourn hereabouts, or if there are some other subjects to think about. I know we've got a lot of things to focus on, but I think we've done a good job today of getting a couple letters to the governor that's going to hopefully push things in a certain direction. I think we're going to focus possibly on testing, as well as getting something from the second homeowners. I think with the question of the second homeowners, It'll probably give the governor some pause, some thought about quarantining, about essential travel as well. And then also Edward working with the Main Street Board and their members to come up with some kind of a comprehensive plan about how to handle the commercial district downtown and allow people to walk, allow people to maybe take advantage of space that they do have, they don't have, maybe some parking spaces, maybe some signage, whatever. So I think that's a positive thing we're moving forward with. But I am open. Commissioner Schlosser, you have your hand up if you have another subject.
It's not really another subject for long discussion, just some feedback so far today from folks, regarding the opening of the beach and boardwalk. I think there's still some clarification, maybe some communication needed about what can or can't be opened on the boardwalk right now. Apparently there's some of the t-shirt shops, et cetera, are opened up. And, just maybe some clarification there. And the other thing is apparently this morning, there was a lot of good compliance with the face coverings and social distancing. So just wanted to point out those two things and just ask for maybe a little more granular communication about the boardwalk shops and what's allowed and what isn't. Thank you.
That's very positive about the face masks. I think we're going to see more positive responses over time. As far as the t-shirt shops, I know 2 or 3 t-shirt shops have been open on the avenue for the last 3 or 4 weeks. Are they an essential? I don't think so, but it slips by. So the police will take a look at it, and building and licensing may go over there and talk to the people about that.
Yeah, and I just think some more communication about exactly what's allowed or not might be helpful. But that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Szymanowski.
Thank you. The governor's orders seem pretty clear to me on what was open or not open, allowed, and what changed last week with the curbside pickup and appointments for salons and jewelry stores. But I think if maybe the communications director could just make it a little bit more, put it in layman's terms, and easy visual or something could be helpful. I do think that the mini golf on the boardwalk could be interpreted a couple different ways, because I think golf has opened up. But does that include mini golf? The intent was probably not, but so I think getting some clarification would be helpful. In closing, I just have a couple questions or thoughts, I think mostly related to the city manager and her staff. And because people have asked me, Sharon, you last week or earlier this week, you said that you had hired 20 of the 80 lifeguards. Has that number changed now with the change in the governor's orders?
That number has changed, and we're actually looking to hire a full complement of 55. The 80 number was incorrect.
Okay, so we will have a 55. Okay, and is there? I guess as we're talking about, city ambassadors and enforcement. Do you see there being any need to hire some additional temporary people just to deal with pandemic type issues like enforcing social distancing and bringing in information to people, or maybe having people at the beach entrances that we could do in short order that could be reimbursed by FEMA or DEMA under what's allowable for reimbursement there? And is that something you've thought about?
Not until we assess what's going on here. I mean, as this changes on a almost daily basis, we have it pretty much under control. We're going to see where things go. as far as putting someone on the beach, I mean, we have a hard enough time, or at the entrances, just getting the right amount of folks, in line for our season. Drug testing them, hiring them, getting them to pass all of our regulations. So it would be difficult, but something that we're continuing to assess.
Okay, thank you. And the one last thing that I would just put it out there for the city manager and her staff to think about, or to maybe think about going into the letter that we send to the Department of Public Health. I know in New Jersey, they have sort of these beach ambassadors or ambassadors out, and they're actually hired by the State Department of Health just to tell people, inform them about social distancing and the need for masks and things like that. So I don't know if that's something our governor is thinking about, having something similar, or if it's something we should suggest. But I did read that was being done, I think, in Cape May or some of the southern New Jersey beach towns. And that's all I have.
We'll stay in tune with that.
Yeah, and also, if you take a look at the declaration made by the governor, at this point in time, he's suggesting that any of this would be in the hands of the local municipalities. But we'll check into it. I would love to see the governor, and I think most of the coastal communities would love to see the governor pass money down here or staffing to take care of some of these issues, because these are the things that we've been talking to the governor from the ACT group for the last 4 or 5 weeks, is that once you do open it up, are there funds available to us, or will there be staff available? And that has not come to fruition.
But I have been watching or monitoring the Rehoboth Avenue and the beach and boardwalk, and it so far so good. Everyone is staying away from each other, and there's wearing masks and stuff. So it's a good start so far.
Yeah, I think it will be, and I think it'll be interesting to see. I think this week will be a little bit busier than it's been the last couple, but it'll be interesting to see next weekend. But hopefully we'll be able to say the same thing you just said, Commissioner Szymanowski, on Monday after 3 days of 80-degree weather. But I think it will go fine. I'm just hoping that we can ramp up over the next 3 to 7 weeks so that the businesses can ramp up, because we may have people in town, but if they're not spending their money at the businesses, that hurts a lot.
Right.
Any other commissioner comments anybody has? I think we made a lot of them today. Just informationally, as of right now, meetings, I would expect that we're going to continue with the Tuesday meetings. So there would be one 3 o'clock on the 19th. That's 3 o'clock. 3 o'clock on the 26th. And then most likely 3 o'clock on the 2nd of June. Those are all Tuesdays. Then the Monday workshop would be June 8th. And the Friday regular meeting would be at June 19th. And since this meeting was at 10 o'clock, any thought to 10 o'clock versus 3 o'clock for that meeting? I mean, we can go either way.
I forget why we changed today's.
The city manager asked us to.
Okay.
Because staffing, I mean, if we don't, then staff has to stay late.
Right. So I'm in favor of the regular meetings being at 10.
Me too.
Yeah, that's especially
I think it's
summertime.
good.
Right.
Yeah,
On a
I
Friday.
agree.
All right. Thank you very much. And we'll talk about that at the next meeting to make it official. But for right now, the regular meeting on the 19th is 10 a.m. and we can talk further in a workshop.
And the workshops are still at 9, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Except for
on
the
Mondays.
Tuesday ones, which are at 3.
Right.
Yes.
Okay.
And if there's nothing else, I'm going to adjourn the meeting if that's okay with everybody. Thank you very much. Very
Thank you.
productive.
Okay, thank
Have a
you.
good weekend.
Thank you, everyone. Good meeting. Thank you.
Thanks.
Meeting.